The Weber Smart Performer has not had the best product launch. Both me and others have had difficulty maintaining low and slow temperatures with this controller. So what is the real issue? And is Weber's latest firmware update the fix? And no, I am not affiliated with Weber in any way. All these are opinions based on my experience. To recap the problem, the Weber Smart Performer would overshoot the set temp for low and slow cooking by over 100 degrees Fahrenheit unless you drastically limited the width of the snake around the outside edge. But that isn't the way I would set up the charcoal grill for low and slow cooking. Instead, I'd have a big pile of charcoal, light it on one end, and then let the controller do all the rest of the work. So here are the prevailing theories on why this problem exists. And the first one, a lot of people predicted that there were air leaks inside of the kettle. You're letting too much air inside of it, which allows the fire to burn hotter, and then it overshoots the temperature. That's a completely valid theory, especially when you consider when I'd close down all the vents on this, a lot of times it wouldn't snuff out the charcoal. It would continue to burn until that charcoal burned out. But after a dozen or so cooks, I found that it seals a lot better because I've got a lot more smoke and grease sealing up some of those gaps between the lid and the vents, and it snuffs it out every time. Another theory was that the hole that they put in for this fan was way too big, so even when the fan was off, it was letting too much air inside of the kettle and letting the temperatures get out of control. And I debunked that in one of my first tests by turning off the controller without adjusting any of the vent settings, effectively leaving this bottom vent open, and the temperatures dropped back into the normal range. That meant that the problem was actually with the controller. So that leaves the idea that the fan on the controller is running when it shouldn't be. Now on that fan, there is a high temperature safety on it, so that way if it gets too warm and might be damaged, it will turn on, so that way it'll draw in cool air in order to be able to cool it down so it doesn't break. But I was doing all of my tests in early spring when the temperature is about 50 degrees and the fan was cool to the touch. I really don't think that was it. I could manually adjust the fan speed, and if I turned it all the way down, the fan would turn off. If the high temperature protection was kicking in, it would continue to run, but it didn't. One of the great things about this grill is that fan is very, very quiet, so it's hard to tell when it's running and when it's not. But luckily for me, Weber got a really good fan on this one, which means it has one special feature that I'm going to exploit. This fan has 4 wires on it. 2 of them are for power, 1 of them is to control it, and the 4th one, the yellow wire, is the tachometer. So as the fan spins, it sends pulses down that wire, and then the controller can read that to know how fast the fan is actually running. If I can connect to that, then I can find out if it's running or not, but also how fast it's spinning. So I connected my oscilloscope and started gathering data. And it turns out that signal processing class in college was useful after all. So just to test to see if the oscilloscope was reading the data the way that it should, I went into the manual fan modes where you can set it for between 1 and 10, so that way I could see if it was producing a different frequency. And I found that at 1, the fan was actually off. Now, I don't know about you, but if it's at 1, I feel like the fan should be spinning. If it's not spinning, it should be at 0. But with each additional step, the frequency increased, and so that means the fan speed was going out for each of those 10 levels. That means I had a good working model and could use it to find out how fast the fan was going when we're actually doing a cook. I wanted to make some reverse seared tri-tip for a family event, so I used that as a good test. I set up the kettle for low and slow, and like clockwork, it overshot by about 100 degrees. The difference was this time I had my oscilloscope connected to it so I could watch that fan speed. What I saw is the fan never shut off even when it exceeded the temperatures. If I were to write the code for this controller at a real basic level, one of the checks that I would have is if the actual temp is exceeding the set temp, I would turn the fan off. And that was clear that this was not happening with that old firmware. So I went to manual fan control mode and set it down to 1, which again was setting it to off. The temperatures dropped again, further identifying that the controller was the problem with this. And right as I was about to release those results, and I saw that Tom Horseman decided to return his smart charcoal grill, Weber reached out and let me know that the firmware update was on its way. With the firmware updated, I tested the fan levels again, and I found that fan level 1 and fan level 2 both had it completely shut off, and all the remaining ones were dropped down so they were a little bit slower than they were before. So for that next low and slow test, I set it up like I did in my very first test with the smart kettle, which Weber described as the minion method with way too much charcoal, and then I lit it on one end. And I realized the charcoal was too close to the probe, so I pulled it back just a little bit, let it warm up, and then I turned the fan controller to 225 degrees Fahrenheit. I also used my own data logger to keep track of the temps because it appears that Weber has now dropped a lot of the CSV data points in their download option. It's likely to cover up the idea that as soon as you get to the set temp, it actually will show the set temp even when the temperature is in a pretty wide range. And I wanted the actual data, so I'm using my own data logger to check it. So I watched it continue to raise the temperature until it hit the set temp, and like magic, for the first time ever, the fan shut off, and I verified that with the oscilloscope. And as I continued to watch it, the temperature would drop a little bit, the fan would turn on, push the temperature up, it would turn off, and it cycled like that on and off as it modulated the temperature inside of the kettle. That was the first time I had any success with this grill with low and slow. So I figured I might as well let it just continue to run, and I let it burn until the charcoal ran out, and that was throughout the night. So that meant the sun went down, the weather changed, it got colder, and the wind picked up in the night as well, which all would impact how well the controller could manage the temperatures. The set temp was 225 degrees Fahrenheit. The average temperature over that 8 hours was 230 degrees, with about 8 degrees of variance plus or minus throughout that cook. And this is the first time that I've been able to do low and slow temperatures and not have it blow way past that and go 50 or 100 degrees over the set temperature. I'm going to need to do a few more tests to really nail it down and get a strong recommendation, but things are looking pretty good with this firmware update.